The wind found her before he did. The stagecoach lay on its side in the cut bank. Eleanor Finch had crawled clear, then stopped because the light thinned and the snow packed itself into every seam. Somewhere, a horse thrashed once and went still. She put her cheek to the drift. Cold climbed like a claim. Rowan Pike came down the draw with a rope over his shoulder. He'd watched it tip and seen the wind erase the sign. He knelt, touched her cheek with the back of his glove and felt her skin tell the truth. "Stay with me," he said. "Anger's a kind of heat. Can you find it?" "Who are you?" she asked, city clear even through the shiver. "Neighbor, enough." He wrapped his coat around her, tied it with the rope, and slid her onto a sled bedded with fir tips. "Name's Rowan. My cabin's close. I don't leave a soul to the drifts." He leaned into the pull. The ridge wind took his hat brim and kept looking for other doors. Above them, 3 crows turned without hurry. She woke to iron ticking and a low fire. The room was small, square, and spare. Pegs held tools in order. A kettle steamed. A knife cut. Line ran from bench to stovepipe. "Don't move yet," Rowan said. "Frost-kissed your fingers will warm you slowly. Too fast burns you from the inside." "My trunk. Held by the bank," he said. "Coachman and a passenger went, hunting for help. Winter will likely turn them back. You held on, that's what mattered." He set a folded pile on the bench. Flannel shirt, cut-down wool trousers, socks. "These belong to nobody now. I'll turn my back while you change. There's a line there." He pointed with a fingertip. "And I don't cross it without you asking. I'll do what keeps you alive, nothing else, understand?" She looked at the knife-cut line, and a steadiness came that she could lean on. "I understand." He turned to the wall and waited while her hands fumbled at buttons. When she swayed, the room did not. By the time she was under 2 blankets, he had melted snow and brought a cup of broth within reach. "Helena," she said, when she could shape words. "I was bound for Helena." "Gallatin cuts mean in a blow," he answered. "You'll be bound there still when you're mended enough to argue." He did not touch the cup to her mouth, only watched until she lifted it herself. Dignity, he knew, makes heat. You give it back when you can. Color returned slowly to her lips. He unwrapped each finger, testing, counting. "You'll keep them," he said. We were in time. Warm stones, swaddled, went along her calves. He turned the kettle off the boil and sat in his chair on his side of the line. She studied him from under the blanket's edge. Weather written fine at the corners of his eyes. Strength is like money, counted before spent. A woman's shawl hung on a peg, mended twice and waiting for a name that did not answer. "Thank you," she said, and the words were large in the small room. "Thank me when you're upright." He laid another log. "What do I call you?" "Eleanor Finch." "Miss Finch, your work tonight is to be stubborn. I'll take the rest." Outside, the wind shouldered the ridge and came back to try again. Inside, water ticked on iron. The line on the floor held its plain promise. Rowan settled into the first watch, boots on, rope coiled. His rules were simple, the sort a man makes where maps go pale. Don't leave a life to the drifts. Don't cross what isn't yours, make heat, keep watch. "Do you live alone, Mr. Pike?" Her voice floated thin, then steadied. "I do." He did not explain the shawl. Winter explains enough by itself. "Tomorrow, if your head's right, we'll see about food that chews, and I'll show you the woodpile and the path you can hold, in a whiteout. After that, we argue about Helena." She closed her eyes. He counted her breaths, then let the numbers go. The cabin talked in its quiet way, the draft seeking, the fire answering, the kettle deciding when to spit. He listened past those small civilities for wolves and for trees shifting their burden. Toward dawn, the wind eased a fraction. Not a promise, only a notice. Rowan rose, set another log, and looked at the knife line. A fence, holding the world in, 2 halves. Eleanor slept then, honest and heavy. He was tired the way of men who spend what they have without regret. He let the wind keep its counsel. The fire carried the rest. Tonight. The day would find them because he had chosen to find her first. Snow erased the path faster than boots could lay it. By noon, the window wore a pale skin of frost, a dim mirror where Eleanor's face hovered. She sat propped while Rowan bound cloth to her hands. The knife-cut line on the floor looked harmless, yet it steadied the room the way a keel steadies a boat. "You'll hate the first standing," he said. "Hate's a kind of heat. We'll use it." She pushed the blanket aside. The air stung. He stood back. Eleanor set one heel, then the other. The cabin rose beneath her. She breathed and fixed the far wall. "Slow," he said. No pride in falling hard. She made the length of the room, turned at the line, and earned the bench with a laugh she didn't intend. Rowan poured broth and watched her swallow. "What are the rules?" she asked when breath allowed. "For this house. For the mountain. Don't starve the fire. Don't lie about the weather. Keep edges dull around people, keep the knife sharp. If something looks wrong at dusk, it will be worse at dawn," and he tapped the floor. "Keep lines where lines belong." "The last one is for me," she said. "It's for us," he said. A man alone gets used to his own shadow. After a rest, he brought a wool cap and his short coat. "We'll take the rope path. See it once. See it in your head when the world goes white." Outside, posts ran from porch to woodpile to springhouse, each with a rope looped chest high. "Hand over hand," he said. "Don't trust your eyes in a blow. Trust the rope in your feet." Eleanor tried the path, fingers clumsy inside the mitts. She reached the woodpile, set a palm on the stacked rounds, and felt the mute comfort of stored work. He placed a length on the block, then a finer billet. "Kindling lets bigger things be possible," he said. "City stoves forgive you, this one keeps score." She held the hatchet the way he showed, wrist straight, chin tucked, 2 sure cuts, then 4. When a gust smothered them in powder, she did not panic. Her hand found the rope. Back inside, he laid the kindling in a crosshatch and let her coax the flame. She fed it small truths until it could hold larger ones. "What did you do before this road?" he asked. "Letters," she said. "I filed them, copied them, carried them between desks for a law office that liked its world quiet and legible. Out here," he said, "the lines are on the land." He set a pot to stew venison, onions, 2 potatoes, and a handful of barley guarded like coin. He let her peel carrots, hands slow but orderly. Steam fogged the window. Outside, the timber drew closer, the world reduced to reach and rope. Inside, the kettle kept time. Near dusk, he showed her the whistle. "If I'm in the yard and you feel wrongness," he said, 2 blasts. "If you feel danger in your bones, 3. If you don't have breath, throw something against the door." "And if you are the one in need?" she asked. He almost smiled. "You'll hear a coyote swear like a man." The first supper was simple. He portioned hers heavy, his light, and made no comment. When she finished, he handed a tin cup of weak coffee and a small square of sugar unwrapped like a secret. "My father kept a store in St. Louis," she said, touching the sugar to her tongue. He swore coffee could make a saint or a liar, of a man depending on the brew. "Both are useful in weather," Rowan said. "Just don't mix them up." Night lay its hand on the roof. He checked the latch twice, then moved his chair nearer the door. The line on the floor stayed exact as a plum. When the kettle sang, he spoke as if answering a question she hadn't dared. "Tomorrow we mend your boots, and I'll show you the spring where water runs under ice. You'll learn the snare sets. Not to use, only to know. Knowing calms people." "Will we speak of Helena?" "In time," he said. "Roads are easier when the person walking them can stand." She drew the blanket to her chin. "Thank you for the rules. Codes keep you from bargaining with yourself," he said. "Bargains get expensive up here." The wind worried at the chinks. Eleanor felt the smallness of the room as shelter, not prison. She closed her eyes with new knowledge. A rope between posts could be a promise, and a line on a floor a measured kindness. The fire trimmed its breath and kept watch with the man who had chosen to. She slept, and the mountain kept its counsel for another night. The ice cracked like a warning beneath the spring. Rowan tested the rope and nodded for Eleanor to follow. At the spring house, a narrow seam of water refused winter's stitch. He broke the crust with a stick and filled 2 pails. "Listen," he said. The under-ice singing went on, faint as a thread drawn through cloth. "It sounds alive," she said. "It is. Remember that, and you'll walk differently." Back in the cabin, he set the pails by the stove, then opened his palm to show a fresh slice along the ridge. Edge asked a question. I answered wrong. Without crossing the knife-cut line, she reached for his hand. "Boil water," she said, "and your spirits. Whiskey or vinegar." He brought a bottle. "Whiskey's for winter and visitors. Today it's a doctor." She washed, wrapped clean strips of cloth, and poured hot water into a pan. "I helped a seamstress once," she said. A needle through her thumb. Blood needs respect. Rowan watched her work. She cleaned, dried, and drew the wound neatly with needle and thread. Her hands shook once, then steadied. When it was done, she tied off, cut the thread, and pressed a folded pad into place. "You sew straight," he said. "I copy straight," she answered. Same patience pointed another way. He flexed and winced. "Fair pay for a lesson," he said, and set his hat on her side of the line. "For the path to the spring. Not a gift. A loan the weather asked for." She fit the brim and laughed once. He drew a simple map in ash on the stovetop. Ridge, draw, spring, then wiped it away with his palm. "Maps go stale fast up here," he said. "Better to carry the song of the place." "What song do I carry for Helena?" she asked. "That you owe it nothing until you're strong." After breakfast, he brought snare wire and 2 deadfall triggers. "Know them by sight," he said. "We set a few for meat, but you won't set them without me." They walked the line among firs. He showed mouse paths, the feather drag of grouse, the clean slot of deer. When drifting powder rose, Eleanor found the rope first, then her feet. The woodpile, Rowan placed around and brought the maul down. The log sprang apart. Orty and a slip of steel kissed his knuckles deeper this time. He swore once. Short. Blood beaded and ran. Eleanor did not think. She took his wrist, marched him inside, and made the stove her ally. Water, cloth, spirits, pressure. "Hold," she said, and he did. She lifted, pressed, and stitched again, quicker now. His breath stayed even. The room held still with them. When she finished, he sat without command. "You took the lead," he said. "You gave me rules," she answered. "I followed them." He nodded like a man paying a debt. "Respect is a fire. Feed it. It gives back." He showed her the boot last and the awl, how to coax a sole into admitting a new stitch. She worked until the seam held. Work is still work, she thought. Near the door, S.K. Rowan went to check the shed latch and stamp a path. Eleanor watched him through the frost. A thin cry cut the wind. One note, not human. Her hand found the whistle. Then she saw it. A coyote nosing, the drift by the refuse pit, rib thin and bold with winter. She blew 2 sharp blasts. Rowan turned, stooped, and threw a frozen clod. The animal measured them, then slid into the timber. Inside again, he shrugged off the snow. "Good," he said. "You saw, you called, you didn't make it bigger." "I thought of tales where coyotes mean bad luck," she said. "Luck is only what you notice first," he answered. "Notice the rope, notice the latch, leave the rest to wind." They ate stew made honest by barley. She cleaned the needle, coiled the thread, and set both in a tin. He glanced at the shawl on its peg, then at her bandaged hands, and left both remarks unmade. When the fire settled to coals, he spoke across the line. "There's a thing you should know," he said. "This cabin carried 2 names. One is left, with Summer. That's the whole of it." "I won't ask for more," she said. "If the mountain wants to tell me, it will." He drew his chair near the door. "Then let it be enough for now." Night agreed and closed in without argument. Outside, the wind kept its counsel. The kettle ticked. The ice sang under the spring, stubborn as promise. Eleanor slept with his hat brim over her eyes and her hands bandaged like pledges. Rowan kept first watch with a stitched hand and the quiet of a man surprised by competence and glad of it. The wind lost its argument by noon. Light slid between torn clouds and showed the ridge as if it had been there all along. Rowan stood at the door and watched the drift lips settle. "Window," he said. "Short. We use it if you can stand." "I can stand," Eleanor answered. The hat brim shadowed her eyes. The lines of fatigue did not win. He set snowshoes on the porch, rawhide tight, ash frames mended in 2 places. "These spread your truth over a wider patch of earth," he said. "Toe in first, pick your line, don't fight the lay." He wrapped a strip of linen across her face against the glare, tied it smooth at the nape. He shouldered a coil of rope, took the sled laced with willow, and checked the whistle at her collar. "We go to the coach. We take only what pays for the strain." The world outside was new-made and unforgiving. Each step wrote a small script, and the wind tried to erase it. Eleanor found the cadence he'd taught. Set, test, push. They moved along the draw until the road cut opened like an empty book. The stage lay on its side, snow feathered into its spokes, a single wheel turned by a patient hand of air. Rowan walked the perimeter, reading. 2 men went out after the blow, he said, pointing with his chin. South by southeast toward the station. Lines are clean. They were alive when they chose. Eleanor's chest loosened. Good. They worked without talking. He pried. The coach door. She used a stick to lift what could be lifted. Leather valises answered to her hands. A small canvas mailbag sulked under a seat and came free with a wet sound. Her trunk was there, split along a seam, silk spilling like something embarrassed to be seen. She looked at the silk for a long breath, then gathered it back, pressed the lid, and tied it with twine from her pocket. "I need very little," she said, and chose a wool dress, a shawl less fine than the one on Rowan's peg, and a book, Plutarch's Lives, its spine cracked but honest. "Food first," Rowan said, and the sled agreed. They found a tin of biscuits rock hard, 2 tins of peaches, a jar of beans, axle grease, a sewing kit in a wooden case, and a flask someone had filled with good rye. He left the rye where it lay. "Why not take it?" she asked. "Whiskey's a coin you spend twice," he said. "You pay on the day, then you pay again after." They set the salvage in the sled, lashing it under a tarp. Eleanor straightened, breath white, hands steady. The horse that had thrashed on the first day lay downslope now, snow smoothed against its flank. She stood a moment and put her glove to her heart. Rowan took off his hat and said nothing, which was the right size of prayer for the place. He cut a short lock of mane with his knife and tucked it under the trace ring. "We respect what carries us," he said. Before they left, Eleanor took a coach plank and a grease pencil from the box. She wrote in a law office hand that didn't waver. "Coach upended, survivors taken to cabin in the draw. Bread, broth, fire, follow the rope from the old pine." She set the plank upright, lashed it to a spoke, and looked at it until the words fixed themselves in her mind. Public words even here, Rowan said, and felt something settle inside that had shifted too long. The sky narrowed again as they hauled. At a shallow rise, he showed her how to sidestep without breaking the crust. When she slipped, she did not look to him, only corrected and found the rope with her mitt. He grunted once, respect paid in the coin he used. At the porch, they shook snow from hems like travelers returning from town. Inside, the cabin took them back without comment. He hung the mailbag on a peg, unopened. "I'll take that to the station when the mountain says yes." Eleanor unwrapped the book and turned a leaf with care. "Plutarch writes men as if the light were on the inside," she said. "Up here it better be," Rowan said, and set a pan for the beans. He opened 1 tin of peaches and divided them evenly, ignoring his own appetite's claim. They ate with the careful joy of people who understand cost. Syrup lacquered the inside of the cups, a small sweetness against the teeth of the weather. He slid a short knife across the line to her. The handle was bone, smoothed by a thumb that had belonged to another life. "You keep this," he said. "Not as protection, though it'll do, but as a thing that reminds your hands they're useful." She closed her palm over it. "I'll return it when I've earned it." "It's not a loan," he said, then corrected himself to be exact. "It's a trust." After the dishes, He set her trunk against the wall. She did not open it. Instead, she pulled thread through the needle and mended his glove where the seam had lost its argument. He watched her and said less than he thought. The size of the room had changed without changing. Toward evening, the light took on that hard, pewter edge that says a sky means to close. Rowan went to bank the snow against the north wall and check the shed. Eleanor stood at the window and saw him lift his head and turn. A distant sound crossed the draw. One shot, clean and far. When he came in, she read the question in his face before he spoke. "Hunters?" she asked. "Maybe. Maybe a man teaching the cold to listen," he said. "Carry this in your mind. Sound travels farther when the world holds its breath." She nodded. "And when will the world exhale?" "When she's ready," he said. He set the mailbag on the table, looked at it, and left it closed. "Tomorrow we quarter the drifts. For the coachman's sign, we plant a spruce bough by the old pine, green side out. That's a safe watermark for men who still remember rivers." "Public signs again," she said. "Up here even privacy talks to the road," he answered. Night gathered its skirts. He put one more log, then two. The line on the floor kept the house true. Eleanor laid the small knife on her side of the line where she could see it from the bed. She felt the clean ache of work and the steadier ache of gratitude she wouldn't name yet. "Mr. Pike," she said when the kettle began to sing, "if the men who left the coach reach the station, will they send help?" "They'll send the kind they have," he said. "Help looks like different things to different towns." He glanced at the shawl on its peg, then back to the fire. "We'll meet whatever comes standing up." She drew the blanket to her, chin and held the knife's weight in her palm without lifting it. The mountain hummed under ice like a song half remembered. Behind his chair, Rowan's shadow leaned long against the door he'd chosen to guard. He counted his watches by the breaths of a woman who had written public words in the white, and by a single far shot that hung above the ridge like a question that would wait until morning. Tracks told the truth first. At dawn, Rowan marked a fan of prints below the old pine. 2 men had circled, wavered, and finally taken the rope toward the road. He planted the spruce bough, green side out, and tied a red strip to the branch. "If they come back hunting warmth," he said, "the sign points truer than my voice could." Eleanor quartered the snow the way he'd taught, eyes low, breath even. In a drift, she found a mitten with the string still tied. There had been no child on the coach. She held it, then tucked it in her pocket like a quiet pledge. By midday, the sky went pewter. They turned home with the mailbag slung and the sled light. Rowan checked the cut bank where sound had wandered yesterday. Inside, he set the bag on the table and looked at it like a door he'd rather not open. "Public letters belong to the road," he said, "but sometimes the road breaks." He cut the cord and fanned the contents: circulars, receipts, envelopes from far towns. One broadside stopped them. "Wanted for fraudulent conveyance, Abner L. Pendry, reward $200. Eleanor's hand did not shake. "I know that name," she said. "He was to be my husband. He owned half of nothing and promised the rest. When I learned the half was stolen, I left with what fit in a trunk and a ticket. He wrote apologies dressed as threats until I did not answer. Then he wrote nothing." Rowan folded the page and slid it under a tin weight. "If the law hunts him, the law may ask those who knew him. Answer what keeps you whole and no more. He will risk anything if cornered," she said. Rowan's stitched hand found the kettle. "Then we will not be a corner. We'll be a place that stands." He set venison and onions to brown and nodded toward the knife line. "The rules: hold when the wind is quiet." While the stew learned patience, he set a skinning knife and a whetstone on her side of the line. "Sharpen," he said. "You'll hear the blade tell you when it's right." She drew the edge and felt the stone hum. When the knife sang, he slid it home. "You've a clear eye," he said. "I spent years making crooked things legible," she answered. "I prefer edges, honest." Near dusk, a drift of cloud shouldered over the ridge. Rowan checked the latch and rope. Eleanor laid the mitten on the mantel as if heat could teach it to speak. He sat, boots planted. I would set the shape of this house in the open, he said. I do not claim you and will not. You are not beholden. While you are here, I am a provision, not an owner. If a day comes when you ask for more, you will speak first and I will hear you standing up. Until then, the line holds. Eleanor looked at the knife-cut mark, then at his hands. Something in her chest answered like a string tuned right. Hear me now, she said. I will not be run by fear of a man's letterhead. I will learn your paths, make food that chews, carry water without spilling dignity, and when the road opens, we will choose it together or not. My word on it. Rowan stood. He set his palm to his breastbone as if swearing. My word on it, he said. After supper, he drew a circle of ash on the stovetop and set 3 pebbles inside. This is the draw, he said. This is the station. This is us. If men come, lift the leftmost pebble so I can see it from the yard. If I lift the rightmost when I return, it means I bring another mouth. And the middle? She asked. He smudged it. What cannot be planned? We live around it without pretending. Snow began, flakes large as moths, then finer. Eleanor banked the fire and set out 2 tin cups for morning coffee. She placed the bone-handled knife where reach would be honest. Before they slept, Rowan unhooked the shawl and brought it to the line. It belonged to a woman who walked down the ridge when summer ended. She chose the wider road, and I chose not to follow. The shawl stays because some things stay. It is not a chain. Eleanor touched the fringe. Let it be a witness and not a ghost, she said, and left it where it had hung. Good night, Mr. Pike. Good night, Miss Finch. He took first watch, listening for wood talk and the small alarms a house gives when the weather leans. Outside, snow reacquainted itself with the land. Inside, 2 vows lay where a stove's light could find them and make them warm. Listening. The thaw came like a truce no one trusted. A Chinook slid down the gulch and set the roof to dripping. Rowan stood at the door with the mailbag and the rope coiled to travel. Window, he said, shorter than last time. Eleanor laced her boots and slipped the bone-handled knife into her pocket. We go to the station, she said. Return what belongs to the road. They left the cabin banked and tight. A second kettle hung ready over coals. The rope path led them to the ridge. Then the cut where the road remembered itself. Snow lay tired, scored by melt. Hollow Tree Station sat low against the bank. Red door, stovepipe breathing. Jonas Fitch opened the door. Rowan Pike, Fitch said. You brought word. Coach turned turtle in the drawer, Rowan said, setting the bag on the counter. 2 men walked for you. I've a survivor at my cabin, Miss Eleanor Finch. This wanted returning. Eyes went to Eleanor and away again. She said, we left a written sign at the coach and spoke the words. Good, Fitch said. Words work when legs fail. He weighed the mail, stamped, and tapped a ledger. Names keep weather honest. Sign in, Miss Finch, so no one claims you lost for their own tail, she wrote clearly. A deputy by the stove, badge dulled by ash, read it aloud. Miss Eleanor Finch. He nodded toward a broadside on the wall. Wanted for fraudulent conveyance, Abner L. Pendry, $200. You know him? I knew what he wanted me to know, she said. Then I learned the rest and left. That's all you need to say, Rowan answered. The deputy poured coffee. We'll raise a crew to right the coach when the crust bears. You brought news, neighborly. Fitch slid a sack of salt and a hank of twine across the counter. For the bringing, and a tin of tomatoes that forgot to be counted. Rowan paid with a strip of deer hide and a promise to cut station wood when the thaw holds. A man in a town coat rose from the corner. Hat, good felt gone wrong in the weather, eyes measuring what wasn't his. Miss Finch, he said, tasting the name. St. Louis sends greetings, we have acquaintances. I traveled from myself, she answered. She knew a messenger when one put on a borrowed coat. Pendry never stepped where another man could. He smiled as if at a joke saved for later. Roads bring old news around, he said. I wish you luck of yours. Luck isn't something a stranger gives, Rowan said, palm flat on the counter. Easy. Fitch rapped the stove rim. Leave worry at the door, he told the room. We don't sell other men's shadows here. They ate at the long table because hospitality is a code even when rations run thin. Eleanor ladled stew, served the freighters, the deputy, Rowan, and then herself. A freighter slid her the last biscuit without comment. A compliment travels far in winter. When the bowls were empty, Fitch turned the ledger back. Another line? Wants filling, he said. Where a person belongs. You can write Helena or draw under Pike Ridge until spring makes up its mind. Eleanor looked at Rowan's stitched hand, at the window where Thaw tapped like a visitor, at the deputy's badge dulled by heat. She wrote, For now, draw under Pike Ridge. The room felt it, and held still, a breath. At the door, the town coded. Man stepped aside. For now is a small fence, he said quietly. Certain men push such fences flat. She met his eyes. Certain men confuse other people's fences with their own, she said. Rowan did not touch her sleeve. They stepped into a wet, bright. On the ridge, the thaw turned slick. He cut a branch for a staff and handed it across the space between them. Public places make the truth stand up straight, he said. You stood. I borrowed your rules, she said. They hold in a room as well as in weather. Back at the cabin, water sang in the kettle. Still, the room was different because they were. She hung the chit Fitch had torn from the ledger, a small rectangle of public belonging, on a peg. Rowan checked the latch and set a log. They'll come to write the coach tomorrow or the next, he said. They'll bring news, wider than we need. We'll take only what pays for the strain. Eleanor laid out 2 cups and the single sugar square they'd saved. She looked at the shawl on its peg and then at the door. For now, we are a house, she said. Let that be enough. Enough is a good size, Rowan answered. He drew the whetstone along the skinning knife. Outside, the thaw held its breath and waited with them. Boots wrote on the porch what the wind couldn't erase. 2 sets, shod hard, stopped at the step and turned without knocking. Rowan touched a print and smelled tallow and town stable. Eleanor let calm reach for her like a coat. We're not alone, Rowan said. We haven't been since the station, she answered. At the old pine, the spruce bough hung wrong, brown side out. Eleanor righted it, tied neatly. Someone wanted a traveler to doubt the safe water. Or wanted us to know he knew, Rowan said. Either way is pressure. A snare lay sprung, its wire coiled on a stump like a lesson. Back at the cabin, a note waited under a stone. Eleanor Finch, you are claimed by contract and promise. Come to the cut at dusk to set this right. Bring the witness who hides you. She read it twice. He never signs. Men who borrow names let weather introduce them, Rowan said, sliding the note under the tin with the broadside. After he set out their small armory, her bone-handled knife, his long knife, a short rifle, 2 lanterns, bell wire, 3 stakes. You mean to go? She asked. I mean to choose ground, he said. We meet where footing is ours. He strung bell wire waist-high between porch and shed, showed a knot that holds and yields only when asked, greased the step with tallow, banked snow into a low breastwork, and set a lantern behind it to read shadows without giving one back. Codes hold when men do not, he said. If talk is offered, we speak. If papers are thrust, we read. If hands go to iron, we go to ground. Fitch's boy, Simon, came from Hollow Tree. Coach is right, he said. That town feller sent riders north and paid a freight or 2. Ask after Miss Finch. Mr. Fitch says keep your latch talked to. Rowan put a biscuit and cheese in the boy's pockets. Take the rope path back. When he'd gone, Eleanor watched the ridge. Pendry won't come. He likes a hand he can throw away. What does he want at the root of it? Rowan asked. My name and my silence, she said. He pledged my expected dowry against land he didn't own. If I sign a release, his. Fraud looks like weather. If I speak, he loses the only map he trusts, other people's belief. Then talk is our cleanest shot, Rowan said. Dusk climbed the draw. A bay showed on the cut, worked hard and held too tight. Behind it rode the man from the station in a town coat and another hired spur. The town man called, a salesman polite. Miss Finch, Mr. Pike, we want a word and a look at papers. Words travel from there, Rowan said. Hold your reins. Keep your hands where the wind can read them. I am Mr. Creary, acting for Abner L. Pendry. He raised a folio. These instruments show Miss Finch's engagement and bond, witnessed and notarized. She left with goods not hers. My employer prefers mercy to court. Eleanor stood in the line and let her voice carry. Read your witness, she said. If the name is mine, it was stolen. If another woman's, you are in the wrong drawer. Creary opened the folio. The seal was fat and red. The hand familiar in its fraud. Eleanor Amelia Finch, he read. Promise of marriage, assumption of debt, conveyance of personal effects, pending. Church words borrowed for a lie, she said. There was no marriage. There is no debt I owe him. Leave the papers on the stump and step back, Rowan said. Creary hesitated, then did. The hired spur missed the bell wire by an inch. Rowan read by the lantern's back glow. The seal's a clerk's toy. The witness doesn't live in Helena or anywhere now. He set the folio down. This cabin is provision, not ownership. The woman in it chooses her ground. You will ride away. Creary's smile thinned. Men with cabins forget the reach of a court. Men with courts forget the reach of a winter night, Rowan said. The hired spur shifted, boot toe slicking on tallow. He windmilled and sat down hard. Eleanor did not smile. Tell Abner Pendry, my name is not a rope he can throw over stolen posts, she said. There will be other attempts, Creary said softly. The truth price is low in these parts. Then bring more money, she answered. They rode off without firing a shot. Rowan coiled the bell wire. Pressure, he said. Revelation enough to name the fight. And a choice, Eleanor answered. We keep to the rules and we keep to each other. He set the bar. Inside, they counted their breaths and readied for men who would not talk twice tonight. The dark tested the latch before the men did. Rowan woke to the house's small alarms. The draft went thin, the kettle sighed differently, a board settled against a new weight. He lifted a finger, and Eleanor sat up without asking why. He hooded. The lantern with a coin. The first touch came along the wall, a soft drag where gloved hands found chinks. The second was a scrap of cloth tied over the chimney mouth. Smoke bent, then kept its temper. They've learned our wire, Rowan murmured. They come soft. Eleanor braided her hair, pulled on boots, and set the bone knife where her hand could find it between sleep and waking. A body pressed the door and found the tallow. Boots skated, a curse wrote itself on the night. The next boot tested smarter, heel flat. Lantern light swelled behind the drift wall, throwing shadows that lied. Hold your ground, came the salesman's voice. We bring a deputy and a writ. What badge? Rowan called. A third shadow lifted a tin star on a leather thong. It shone like a coin in a preacher's palm and told the same kind of truth. Eleanor set the coffee pot to hiss. Sound can be a wall when wood is thin. She set 3 pebbles. Draw, station, us. If they breach, she said, we go low behind the table. You take high. Clean, Rowan said. A shot cracked the window skin. Glass tinkled like February bells. Rowan answered once into the drift lantern. Darkness fell the way a witness closes his eyes. 2 more left, Eleanor breathed. Boots, scraped, counting the step between nerve and foolishness. She blew 3 blasts. The men flinched. Door, Rowan said. She fetched the wedge, set it at the lower jamb so a boot would waste itself on oak. He slid the bar home. The next kick thudded, slid, failed. From the shed side came a scrape, then lamp oil's sour breath. Fire, Eleanor said, already moving. She threw the water they kept for just that lie. Oil spread across wet boards and found no friend. They brought dry rags, Rowan answered. But the thaw is ours. Another ball punched the plank. Splinters nicked his cheek. He did not swear. He sent one round to teach the dark discretion. Outside, a man cried once, silence tilted wrong. Roof, Rowan said. He'd tied a rope to the rafter for such a guess. Eleanor slid under the bed, hand on the line. Weight hit shingles. The rope shivered its noose down to her bones. She jerked once. Snow sloughed from the eave in a single white pelt and carried the climber with it. The thud was hard. 2 now, Rowan said. A lantern bloomed where a hand thought itself alone. Rowan shot, not to kill but to douse. The light died. Listen, Eleanor whispered. The world narrowed to ragged breathing at the door, close to the wedge. When the panel jerked, she slid her blade through the crack and took the skin that volunteered. A howl answered, animal and new to the mouth that made it. Enough, the salesman called, voice higher. Back off. We come again by law. You come by daylight if you come, Rowan said. Bring a real deputy and your real name. Bootsteps retreated, then paused. Something small hit the porch and skittered. A brass button stamped with a store's mark Eleanor knew. Creary lost this, she said, from a coat bought on credit. They pay out of other people's pockets, Rowan said. Only then did he touch the splinter line on his cheek. Eleanor cleaned it with coffee, then whiskey, hands steady. You'll scar, she said. Men who keep houses do. I kept one tonight, he said. They didn't sleep much after. The fire burned small and true. Outside, a wounded man limped toward the cut. Inside, 2 people learned a harder lesson. The cost that keeping a vow honest. Before dawn, Rowan walked the rope path and found where a hand had cut it near the spring. He spliced a new length, tied a knot that holds and yields only when asked, and planted another spruce bough green side out. He reset the tallow on the step and rehung the bell wire, this time lower, where a hasty man would not see it. On the stump he left 9 words with a coal. Paper meets daylight. Names meet truth. Come hungry. He came back with frost in his beard and a look that chose. They'll bring paper and more mouths, he said. Then we will bring truth and our own names, Eleanor answered. The rest we can pay. Light tested the east and found the door still barred, the wedge faithful, and 2 cups waiting without sugar. They had paid out of themselves and were not bankrupt. Daylight left no place for borrowed names. They came when the ridge quit steaming. Rowan stood in the yard with his rifle grounded. Eleanor pinned Fitch's ledger chit inside her coat. Across the draw, Creary rode with 2 new men and the wounded, one from last night. A real deputy rode too, Worcester badge dull. By daylight, Rowan called. By authority, Creary answered. He held a fresh folio high. A writ of claim, executed in Helena, compelling Miss Finch to return goods and person to the party wronged by her desertion. Let the deputy open it, Eleanor said, and let the station read. They went to Hollow Tree, drift walls shrinking like arguments learning their size. Fitch met them in the yard. Freighters stood with mugs. The deputy broke the seal. He-o. Read slowly. Name's right, date's convenient, he said. Witness is a clerk I never heard of. It says sheriff present, and I wasn't. Paper travels faster than men, Creary said. Sometimes it trips, Fitch said. He tapped the wanted broadside. Pendry buys names he can't keep. Eleanor stepped onto the porch. I make this public, she said. There was no marriage, no debt assumed, no dowry pledged. Mr. Pendry pledged my expectation to land. He did not own, knowing it a lie. I left before harm doubled. I have the trunk I purchased and the clothes I wear. I sign my name to that truth here. Fitch turned the ledger. She wrote, hand steady. The deputy looked from folio to broadside, to Rowan's stitched cheek, then to the woman. Creary, the deputy said. What name do I write for your employer's man of record? Creary will do. Given and family? Creary, he said again. That's not a name, Fitch said. That's a fog. Rowan set a coil of freight rope across the yard, slack and harmless looking. He checked knots that hold and yield, then stood back. Creary gathered his reins. Enough theater. The writ stands. Miss Finch returns or faces arrest. For what charge? The deputy asked. Breach and theft. Whose theft? Eleanor said, palm on the ledger. Name the goods you claim. Name the witness who saw. Me promise anything but my own safety. Creary shifted. His wounded man edged his horse. Hooves nosed the slack rope. Rowan raised his hand. Deputy, we'll have no stampede. He flicked a knot. The rope bit, lifted, then dropped, just enough to startle a horse into sidestepping. It shouldered Creary's mount into the trough. Water leapt, tempers swore. Hired men reached for iron and met freighters facing them with hammers. Let's make a clean table, Rowan said. The deputy raised both hands. No one draws, he said. Mr. Creary, give me that writ. I will carry it to Helena with Miss Finch's sworn statement and the wanted notice. I'll ask the real sheriff to weigh fraud against the claim. Until then, there is no arrest here, and no taking. Creary's smile went smaller. You shelter a woman against the law at your peril. The law is the room we are standing in, Eleanor said. And we just opened a window. Rowan set a brass button on the counter. Dropped. On my porch by a man wearing a false badge, he said. Store mark says Wolcott's. Add impersonation to your packet. The deputy pocketed the button and turned to the riders. You three will wait out of my sight while I write, he said. If you're hungry, Fitch will sell you a plate. If you're angry, the hill will hear it. Either way, you wait. They waited because a man with authority finally said something that fit the shape of the day. Fitch poured coffee in a ceremony. Eleanor signed her statement. Rowan wrote his as witness, script tight as wire. Creary leaned in the doorway and chewed his choices. You think the sun makes the truth, he said. It only makes the lies squint. That will do, the deputy told him. Take your men. Ride by the cut. I don't want you on this porch when I finish the second copy. They left without firing a shot, which is the first wisdom some men learn. Fitch pressed bread into Eleanor's hand and nodded toward the broadside. Truth eats better when it's public, he said. On the ride home, Rowan coiled the rope and felt danger cooling in his arms. It wasn't a grand fight, he said. I prefer the kind that ends with a pen, Eleanor answered. He looked at her and let the quiet name itself. What the day decided without louder proof. The ridge stood patient. The hill kept witness. The path home held, taut as a rule. Behind them, the station began writing the town's version. A woman stood up, a man stood beside, and daylight, for once, kept its promise. Spring wrote its answer in water. When the Chinook settled for good, Rowan lifted the wedge from the door and set it on the sill like a retired sentinel. Eleanor opened the window and swept, letting the room trade breaths with the day. Fitch rode up with the deputy and a paper folded twice. News from Helena, the deputy said. He read, The writ is void. The seal was misused. Abner L. Pendry is in custody for fraudulent conveyance and impersonation. Complaint of harboring a fugitive against Rowan Pike dismissed, with thanks for aid to travelers. Eleanor's fingers tightened, then eased. The room seemed larger, simpler, and honest as unpainted wood. Outside, the ridge listened, and even the stove ticked like agreement at last. We'll say it plain, the deputy added. Your names are clear. Names carry, Rowan said. Better to carry them clean. Fitch set down a small parcel. Inside lay muslin, 4 wooden buttons, and a packet of seeds. Beans, squash, potato eyes in a sack marked Spring. Eleanor pressed the packet to her chest. Thank them, she said. I'll make the thanks visible. When the riders left, they walked the ridge where Meltwater spoke. Rowan pointed to a south slope scattered with stones. The ground holds there, he said. Posts won't wander. Beans will climb, she answered. They marked a square with stakes and string. He set the first post with a level made from a bottle's bubble. She packed soil with the heel of her hand. Work named them without fuss. Back at the cabin, Rowan lifted the plank that bore the knife-cut line. He ran his thumb along it. I kept this to hold 2 lives steady, he said. It taught me to trust a room, she said. Now teach me to make a shelf. He planned an edge and set the plank across 2 brackets. They lifted pots onto it, iron and tin, useful. A boundary turned to provision. The space between them closed like a gate settling true. Planting began when the ground agreed. They bent rows with a string and a straight stick. Potatoes went in with eyes up. Beans found poles. She set the squash where the sun loitered. He split a log for a sluice. Water listens when you guide it. They hung the shawl in the shed as a work cloth and left the peg bare. On a Sunday that smelled of wet pine, Fitch brought a preacher who believed in short words and long work. The preacher asked for names, asked for the law's peace, asked if anyone had a good reason to delay. Spring, Rowan said, and the crowd laughed, because the mountain was finally answering. Eleanor looked at Rowan, at the shelf made from a line, at the seed packets, at the ridge that had kept watch. I choose this ground and this man standing up, she said. Rowan took off his hat. I vow to keep heat, keep watch, and never cross what isn't asked, he said. When you ask, I cross with both feet. They traded iron rings bent by a blacksmith who owed Fitch a favor. The preacher pronounced what the room already knew. Coffee passed hand to hand. That evening, they walked the boundary they had marked with a string. The creek ran braver. He carried a post maul, she, the seed packet thinned by use. At the porch, he set the retired wedge upright like a milestone. First tool of the house, he said. First witness, she said, setting the bone-handled knife beside it. Second witness. You still mean to see Helena? He asked. I mean to write when the beans flower, she said. To go after harvest if going still makes sense. I have less to prove to it now. You have a shelf, he said. And a name that fits, she answered. When darkness rose from the gullies, he closed the door without the wedge. The house held. In the morning, they would pound 3 more posts and stretch a wire between them, not to keep people out, but to keep a promise in. People passing later called the place Finch and Pike, because names yoked side by side pull straighter. They said a woman once wrote public words in snow and made a town remember its better self. They said a man kept fire and kept watch until keeping could turn into sharing. They said spring wrote its answer in water, and 2 people read it aloud. That's how the story was told along Pike Ridge when the beans climbed and the first potatoes came out of the hill, plain, clean, with enough heat to last a winter. And, if you ride that way, you'll see the shelf made of a line and the wedge turned witness, and you'll know why folks say this small homestead made history.